mics.
Really? Hello everyone and welcome to the Zube Lecture Series, our first rainy Zube Lecture Series. And welcome to the Department of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning if you're coming from elsewhere. My name is Peter Dunn. I am the faculty coordinator for the Zube Lecture Series. As many of you know, the Zube Lecture Series was created from a gift from Irv and Margaret Zube. Irv was a chair of our department for a number of years, and they created this endowment specifically so that we could bring scholars to the departments to stimulate and enrich our academic conversation in regional planning and landscape architecture. So we do this almost every week in the semester. We have a lot of exciting talks. Next week, we're excited to invite David Leatherbarrow, who's giving a talk as part of the Quickness Symposium, which is a 5-college architecture symposium. So come back for that. But today, we're delighted to have Karen Christensen, who's here to talk about third places, and here to introduce her is our own Robert Pine.
Thank you, Peter. We're very honored to have Karen Christensen here today. Karen has a really varied biography of writing projects and environmental activism. She's an entrepreneur, environmentalist, and she co-founded Berkshire Publishing Group here in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Before that, she worked in London for Blackwell Scientific Publications, as well as Faber and Faber. She went to school at the University of California, Santa Barbara, as well as in the United States. So she began her writing career editing the papers of some very famous people, including working as an assistant to Valerie Elliott, working on T.S. Eliot's papers. She also worked with Sophia Mumford, the widow of Lewis Mumford, in his book. So after time abroad, she came back to the United States and to promote her first U.S. book, Home Ecology. And for the architects out there, she also has a book called Green Home and Eco Living. She's been the editor and co-editor of important publications like the Encyclopedia of Community by Sage Publication, Women and Leadership, The Future of Sustainability, and The Business of Sustainability. She's here today to talk about third places and her work with Ray Oldenburg on the next edition of his incredible book, Great Good Places. Please welcome Karen Christensen.
Switch me on, can you hear me?
Yes.
You know, I'm just thinking, what would Sophia Mumford say if I told her I was now talking about at a landscape architecture and regional planning? I mean, it's sort of Mumford's world. Where when I knew her, we were talking about literature. I first met her because she had worked at a literary magazine in New York called The Dial, which published T.S. Eliot. So it was all very literary and then a personal friendship. And I'm actually working on a biography of Sophia, who is the most fascinating person. But anyway, I'm gonna picture her in the audience. She wouldn't be dumbfounded. But I'm talking about another kind of legacy today, that a project that's been left to me by my friend Ray Oldenburg. The thing about Ray is that I only met him 3 times. We corresponded for 20 years before I ever met him. And not all of you will know this book. This is a landmark book, a surprise landmark book. And I'm going to introduce you to Ray to start things off. This is the latest edition of the original book, which was published in 1989, and really transformed a lot of people's thinking. So you will hear why as I talk today. Ray Oldenburg, I actually found he was a very modest man, and he did not talk much about himself. He did not kind of look for glory and awards. But I found that I actually, as a publisher, I published his very last book, which is called The Joy of Tippling. Tippling being drinking, but drinking slowly and talking. It's a little book about conversation, and in that he told the story of how he came to write The Great Good Place. So I'm going to read that because I want you to feel that Ray is here with us. My first plea for the return of some semblance of community in the United States was published late in 1989. The book was entitled The Great Good Place: Cafes, Coffee Shops, Community Centers, Beauty Parlors, General Stores, Bars, Hangouts, and How to Get You Through the Day. The core idea was that we all need a place, apart from home and work, where we can relax in warm company and be ourselves outside the roles we play in family and on the job. In such places we meet and get to know people different from ourselves, and the resulting diversity of association is favorable to the development of the individual and the hope of a unified society. The book caught on in both hemispheres, indicating that the course of urban development worldwide leaves much to be desired. I'm a sociologist by training, and thus in a field in which one's personal experiences may have an effect on the course of one's study. They certainly did in mine. After graduate school, I took on teaching positions in small, friendly towns, where my wife and I could walk to restaurants, grocery stores, and even at the University of Nevada at Reno, casinos. We only used the car for such occasions as gem hunting on weekends or trips to California. All the necessities of life were within walking distance, as they had been in the small town where I grew up. Yet when we moved to Pensacola, Florida, he took a job at the University of West Florida, where he spent the rest of his career. A city plagued by sprawl, we found ourselves for the first time in a modern suburban subdivision. Here, one's house was all important, because there was nothing else. Alleys had been done away with, so cars and garages were parked out front and not attractive. The sidewalks were empty and there were few signs of life. Mandated setbacks required lengthy but useless front lawns, expensive to maintain. The use value of acreage surrounding our house was zero. With nothing within walking distance, we needed 2 cars even before we had children. The home-to-work shuttle was my life, and I hated it. On the drive to work one day, I noticed a bakery with a coffee counter and several picture windows, through which I saw working men having coffee. The next day, I left home early and stopped by. After my 3rd visit, all the men knew and accepted me. There were 9 regulars, and only 2 of them were in the same line of work. The chatter was rich, the laughter frequent. I never had a completely bad day after that. On the work front, the lack of community where we lived affected me deeply enough that I abandoned the specialty known as symbolic interaction, for which I had been trained. One of its major tenets was that reality is a matter of how we define it, what we agree upon in our discussions. The modern American automobile suburb took me away from that view totally. There's a physical reality in which we exist that has a profound effect on what is possible for us. I've often thought, I've worked with lots of people, lots of scholars in many, many disciplines, and I've actually thought that Ray seemed often more like an anthropologist to me than a sociologist. So how did I come into this? I was a young mother, young environmental writer living in London, and an American publisher bought my book that had been very successful in England called Home Ecology. And I went to Denver at the end of 1989, so the year that Ray's book was published. My book had been published in the spring, to work with this American publisher on Americanizing my book. I'm American, get this. I'm the only American who's translated a book from English to American. And my editor one day, we were driving, and he said, "I just read something that I think will interest you." And he handed me his copy of Ray's book and started talking about how it had made him feel the kind of lack of friendship, lack of a third place in his life. And he said, I think it will interest you. And it not just interested me, it really changed my life and my direction, because I had been reading as an environmentalist lots of prescriptions for a sustainable life, sustainable future. And they always mention the word community. Community was always there, but I thought, what the heck is community? So that has been sort of one of the central threads in my life and work since then. And it was Ray who started me on that path. So as I did other things, I wrote him a letter, because I'm a nut for letters. And we corresponded on and off, and he would send me, I would ask him questions, he would send me book suggestions. And then it came in, so probably, well, it was a good 10 years later, we came up at my publishing company with the idea of doing an encyclopedia of community and pitched that to Sage, which is a very large academic publishing company. And they took it on, and I asked Ray Oldenburg to be the editor for the social life section. So we worked by email by this time. We corresponded, continued to correspond about just general issues related to third places and community. But finally, in 2012, his work kept percolating for me, would bubble up. I thought I really should meet him face to face. And so I flew to Pensacola and spent a couple days with him and his wife, and he took me to his various, haunts. And we talked, and I asked him questions. I actually, right before he died at the end of 2022, and right before he died, within weeks of his death, I discovered that I'd actually made a video interview with him on my phone in 2012, thinking it would just be a practice run, but I never had a chance to do it again. And it's, it's a little wobbly. I was kind of early. I was like, hadn't learned to do that. So, but it's, so we do have, we captured a bit of that. And on one of my, as we corresponded, and on one of my last visits, I'd said, we kept saying there should be a new version of The Great Good Place, because so much has changed. It was written and published before there was social media. There are a number of areas that he knew he hadn't had space for. He hadn't written anything about the elderly people, for example, and he hadn't really gone into some of the things related to children. And certainly some of the material it's very American. So we talked about it, and I said, we should find you a co-author if you're not feeling up to writing it. And I asked a couple people who I thought would be suitable, and no one felt familiar enough with it or committed enough to the topic to do it. And eventually it was like it was going to be done. I was going to do it, and it was really quite amazing to find out how. It was only then that I found out how close I was to the topic and how closely it fit with the things that I care most about. Certainly I have a great interest in community, but it ties into transportation. I'm known in Great Barrington as the Berkshires as the train lady because of my work. Oh, you're the train lady! And I realized that I could bring to it things that obviously gender is one of the issues that needs to be looked at from a different perspective. I have international experience that Ray didn't have. The book is American and European. I've done a lot of work in China and spent a lot of work in China, so I can, and focused on global projects, so bring those in. And I'm going to read you just a little, one of the first things I found that made me realize how much third places are part of the Chinese life. It's not a surprise that they're showing interest in this idea right now. This is from a friend's book called Red Dust Lane. People get together a lot, not only in the Shikumen, which is the communal housing, but in the lane too. Their rooms being so crowded, people need to find space elsewhere. All day long, the lane is vibrant with life, informal, relaxing, and spontaneous. In the early gray light, women will come out in their pajamas, first carrying chamber pots, then later hurrying to the food market, returning with full bamboo baskets, and preparing food in the common sinks of the lane, while spreading the gossip heard overnight. Men will stretch out, practicing Tai Chi outside, brewing the first pot of Dragonwell tea, singing snatches of Beijing opera, and exchanging a few words about the weather, or the political weather. For lunchtime, those people at home will step out again, holding rice bowls, chatting, laughing, or exchanging a slice of fried pork for a nugget of steamed bellfish. Now that was for probably in the 60s or 70s. But in my time in China, I saw things that weren't dissimilar. People hanging out on the street, men crouched around little tables playing chess. This kind of street life is really important in many parts of the world for reasons that we will be looking at. The thing about third places is that they're hugely varied. Just let me run through, you heard in the subtitle some of the examples, but I have a lot more. Cafes, coffee shops, tea houses, general stores, barber shops, beauty parlors, bars, taverns, bookshops, post offices, diners, even gas stations. But what I discovered is that I faced a couple of real challenges in doing a new version of this book. One was the people who said, "You can't change it." The woman who wrote it became very successful because there was a big review of this book by an unknown sociologist in the New York Times book review. No one expected it. I don't know where he found out about it. It got to a woman who really understood it and wrote very enthusiastically, and I was able to meet her. She's one of the people who said, "I love that book, you can't change it." So that was a bit tricky, but fortunately, because I'm a publisher, what I did was reissue in a fresh cover the original text. So we have Ray's text will live on. I will not mess with it. So the new book will be I will use some of Ray, but it will be our book, our shared and joint book. The big problem was that by this time, and especially as the pandemic was drawing to an end, the term third place was being used for just about anything that was not home, not work. And it took me quite a while to get a handle on that. Now, some people describe third place as a concept or a theory, but it is not that. It is based on Ray's observation of real places and simply identifying the common characteristics of these many types of places where certain things happen, and then giving it a name. But it does not mean anywhere that isn't home or work. It means your home from home. It's your other place. You have your home, you have your workplace, and it's the other place that adds that third leg, that really essential third leg to life. And these are found all over the world and throughout history. So I realized I was going to have to struggle to define and explain. It's not that the other things that are being called third places are bad. They are actually good. But if we lose sight of what makes a third place, which is a particularly satisfying kind of place to have in your life, that's a problem. So even though I'm going to go through these characteristics, so it'll help you. What I'm hoping is that this will help you as an observer. Think about the kind of places that you know and have known, and what you're looking for. And how to identify a place that might be that third place for you. Some people talk of Richard Florida's refers to fourth place. Some people talk about 2.5. I don't know how to say it. The 2.5 place. A little confusing. It's perhaps most often confused with a public space. So all kinds of great public spaces like libraries, museums, parks are being referred to as third places. They might be at times, but not in general. They are desirable, and there is synergy between them and third places. And that, for those of you who are regional planners, town planners, I think this is something that will be useful for you to look at. The other thing I learned is that in France, third place, tier deux, is actually a part of the national policy, but it doesn't mean, not the what my French colleague calls the Oldenburgian set theory, or the Oldenburgian sense. It means co-working spaces, fab labs, and such, that they are not identifying traditional, what Ray called bistros, cafes, as third places. So it's kind of an interesting one. There's a big French project, and I'm supposed to record an interview to help launch it in a couple weeks. And so I'm not sure quite how I'm going to handle that. I'm not going to use the word Oldenburgian either. But even worse than that, I would find people saying that, that third places now are impossible, that we can't have them, they don't exist anymore. Especially in America, and there's long threads about this on Reddit. Reddit is a really interesting source on third places. You can check it out. And a lot of complaints about America, because in America, the problem is in America, other places are much more satisfactory in terms of third places. But I did, for a little while, wonder if they could be extinct, if I was going to be looking for things that didn't exist. Not so, I'm delighted to tell you. But one of the triggers for all this was Starbucks. Now, Starbucks has played a very significant role because Howard Schultz, the original and then later CEO and CEO of Starbucks, latched onto the term third place very early. And so I'm going to read you a little bit of, because this is the evolution. So 1995 is the first reference that I have found. In the Starbucks annual report, 1995, so that's about 5 years after the book was published. I've been told that they asked Ray to consult with them and that he turned them down, but I don't have any documentation. I didn't hear that from Ray himself. But what it said, this was written by Schultz himself, you get more than the finest coffee when you visit Starbucks. You get great people, first-rate music, sound advice on brewing, excellent coffee at home. At home, you're part of a family. At work, you're part of a company. And somewhere in between, there's a place where you can sit back and be yourself. That's what a Starbucks store is to many of its customers. A kind of third place where they can escape, reflect, read, chat, or listen. In 2018, he talked about returning to America from Italy, determined to create a similar experience, a new third place between home and work, and to build a different kind of company. I wanted our stores to be comfortable, safe spaces where everyone had the opportunity to enjoy a coffee, sit, read, write, host a meeting, date, debate, discuss, or just relax. Well, that was 2018. The pandemic came, the chairs started to disappear. And Starbucks has now become much more of a drive-through than anything else. But its press release of 2022 which I'm glad they didn't see, said they're reimagining the third place. And they're creating a virtual third place as part of their drive-through experience. So we are going to look at, oh, there's Ray, sorry, I should have showed you. There's Ray, that was 2012. And this, I thought was interesting. A colleague sent it to me from China, that they're putting the English term third place on a new library. But here we go to the points. On third place is open and unstructured. This photograph it kind of gets kicked around. Barbershops actually are really important. In the Black community, especially for Black men, you can find a lot about barbershops as a place of mutual support and just a place to hang out. This one is from Italy. But people feel free to come and go. The whole idea of membership for a third place is really just, it's just not how it works. Everyone is equal when they walk through the door. Ray called it leveling, because there used to be, in the early coffee houses, they talked about leveling. Because they were democratic. That's one of the things about third places, is that they were had a very important role in promoting democracy in earlier centuries. In England in particular, and then in the United States, or the colonial America. But what I have discovered, what isn't in the first book at all, is that bathhouses, we talk about watering holes as being, bars and taverns, but in fact, water is really important in lots of cultures. This is a photo. I don't think this is a great photo. This is Iceland. Let's see if I have in Japan, they actually have a term they have a neighborhood bathhouses called sento, and they actually have a term that means naked bonding. So I think in terms of leveling, you can't do much better than that. But someone sent me a story from Iceland. He said when he was studying the legislature, there were year-round heated pools with hot tubs, open every day in most communities. I once asked a hotel manager if there's a lobbying organization for hotels. He replied that there was none, but if he had a problem, he would simply go to the pool downtown, where he knew the Minister of Finance would almost every day after work. And he talked to him there. He said, in fact, I had some of my interviews in hot tubs. He said it was a challenge to take notes. So this is something that I will be covering, especially these neighborhood ones. Iceland and Japan are particularly, even today, known for their public baths. But lots of places, England has public baths that they're restoring. But I don't know that they have this sort of daily quality. Money is never a barrier. Some people think third places have to be free, and that is not the case. Most third places throughout history, there has been a charge because they've been commercial establishments of some kind, but they haven't been expensive. It wasn't a barrier. In fact, they called the early coffee houses in England Penny University, because you could go in and they had newspapers there, and as well as lots of discussion. This photograph comes from Prague. My friend said, don't these people have Netflix subscriptions? Every night they're just out sipping their Pilsner and talking. And you buy a beer and you drink slowly, as Ray advised. He was taught early, put the beer glass down. Don't keep it in your hand. Conversation is the main activity. Conversation is absolutely key, and that is how you're going to tell in some places a third place, which means it's not about going for entertainment. It's about the people who are there and looking at people face to face and talking, although you don't have to talk. And I think that makes some people nervous. But you don't have to, you could listen. Listeners are valuable in the third place. I took this photo in Italy, and I just loved it because to the right, there's a cafe, which is where we'd gone to get, in the morning. But these guys looked like they just were, that was their regular hangout, and they were talking with such animation. I just loved it. So you can see I took this years ago, but it was Ray's influence because I was paying attention and really intrigued by them. It's near your home or work. Ideally, you can walk there. Now, this is a cemetery in Istanbul. And I included it, not because you're necessarily going to find a lot of conversation there, but because during the pandemic, I got a journalist from Istanbul contacted me. He said people are using the cemeteries. Apparently Istanbul has beautiful cemeteries, and that they are the only green space in many parts of the city. So people have, during the pandemic, started using them and sort of started to see them differently. And I was intrigued by that. And the point was, it was near their homes. And the pandemic, the lockdowns, I think did make people pay a bit more attention to what was nearby and available. Walkability is hugely important, as Ray pointed out in that passage that I read. It has regulars, absolutely key, and this is a distinction that gets passed over too often. This is a photograph from my friend Kathy Giuffre in Italy, who she and her husband moved to Italy and have become embedded in the local community and hanging out. She calls it the pub. It's a sort of restaurant bar. And you go down there. The serendipity of the third place, and that's what makes it, one of the things that makes it so refreshing is you can go, you don't have to schedule anything, there's no appointment to be made, you can come and go as you please, and you don't know what's going to happen when you get there. You don't know who is going to be there. You'll see some familiar faces and some that are strangers, and you just can wait and see what happens. And that just adds such a, we just don't get enough of that, do we? At home and work, things are so predictable. And there's so much responsibility. That's the other thing, is you have no responsibilities. And this is the last point, and I chose this photo of these little Chinese boys I saw in one of the hutong. It's a grandma sitting by them, and they're just hanging out. Now, these faces are what I expect to see in a third place. They're just hanging out. They're playing cards and they're talking. It's conviviality, the essence of conviviality. The thing about a third place is that and actually, one of the things for those of you who are architects, when I'm writing about this in the book, I found that what came to mind was Christopher Alexander's phrase, the quality without a name. It's kind of hard to figure out exactly what to call this because one word that comes to my mind is euphoria. That's a little too much. But it's a lightness, a happiness and ease that you do get from a third place. And one of the people often say, in told Ray, they'd hear about it and they'd say, oh, that's like a bar or a tavern. And people often think of the TV show Cheers, which I don't know if you've seen that. But you perhaps have heard the theme song. But this particular bit of it, the song, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. And then I found a passage in a Chinese short story that echoes this, but also talks about that euphoria. Everyone's spirits would soar, especially those with troubles of one kind or another. Not even paradise on earth could hold a candle to their home away from home. So when I come to this, and I'm going to show you a few photographs now, and then because I want, I'd like to have, I've got some slides that are just photos, and I want to talk to you about them, and I would be happy to have your comments on them. But one of the things that also developed in the course of working on this new book is I was reading, or looking back at a book called Limits to Growth, because I had systems thinking on my mind. I work in sustainability, and this cropped up. And I thought about systems, that's the thing. And I realized that creating third places, creating an environment in which third places can thrive is a way to solve a whole bunch of problems. The connection with loneliness is obvious. Even though third places are not a solution to loneliness that you find in all the many articles on the subject. Loneliness has been studied and written about for decades, but it's been exacerbated today by the corporation enriching distractions of online media, and by our dispersed and ephemeral relationships. But the thing about third place makes you feel welcome, accepted, and seen, just as a person, without any baggage. In fact, I was talking to a guy, my car mechanic, and he was telling me about this old friend of his, and he said, they were talking about political polarization. And he said, he asked his friend, he said, do you know what my political beliefs are? Do you know where I go to church? And the friend said, why would I need to know that? Because they met as people. They didn't have to have an identity that was defined, their identity was not defined by their occupation or their church affiliation. And seeing our troubles are all the same is hugely important too. Just having people to talk to and laugh with and joke with and tease. And there's often practical support. So I think that third places are a really important thing to get into the discussion of loneliness. And they are absent from almost everything that's written on the subject. Climate's very important. Walkable communities, transit-oriented developments, smaller houses, resilience, preparing for disaster. What could be better than the kind of community and relationships you build in a third place? Local businesses are healthier. They're better locations, they're more accessible, they develop a critical mass. Reduced consumption and waste. You're not dependent on things for fun and satisfaction. There's more activity that doesn't have to be monetized. And the remote and hybrid work that sometimes goes along with it can energize small communities. Political polarization. Now, you have to develop those relationships. But seeing and talking to people who have different views, come from different backgrounds, is a source of interest and entertainment. That's what we need to pick up on. It's not a job, it's not work, it's not conflict. It doesn't have to be. It's interesting to be around people who are different from you. People are interested. And we like people more because of something called the mere exposure effect. If you are with people more often, you generally tend to like them more. Studies have shown this. Interesting one. And you find common ground. and develop confidence about diversity. I think it's really important for kids to get a relaxed introduction to civic life. Including kids in third place is really important. It doesn't happen. We talk about diversity a lot in terms of race and gender and stuff, but age is also a huge issue. How much time do you spend with people who are much older or much younger than you? Probably not a lot. It's one of the huge changes in recent years, and it's a shame. And it makes it hard for kids to learn the skills of group dynamics, leadership, and to learn about hospitality, to learn about the generosity of spirit that you find in a thriving third place. So I'm going to open this up, but this is one of my, this comes from Kathy in Italy, and it's a terrace outside the pub. There are many design elements, Ray did not go into this, that make a third place more likely, because third places to create a third place is a bit like gardening. It's more like gardening than like architecture. The building is there, but if the people aren't there and it's not happening, and this sense, Kathy was telling me that you could, someone who's a little nervous can linger outside and the door's open. There's a fluidity about that. Ray always said you don't want to get trapped in the wrong place. You walk into a bar and you realize it's not for you. You need to turn on your heel and get out of there. Find somewhere else. I don't know if you have any memories of places. This is called Penny Rock, and I only know about this as a third place because I have a friend who was a kid in Great Barrington. This is where the kids met. They played cards, probably marbles, I don't know what game. It's just in the woods, it's near, not at all far from town, just slightly away from the street I live on. But it's completely private, just screened, and they could just turn up there. So that is how simple a third place can be. Generally, third places have tables and something to drink, but this is the baths, sports baths in England. I remember my English boyfriend had played cricket and rugby, and they would get into the bath after the game. That's how they would get clean, but it was very social. So that's just another example of a different kind of watering hole. This is from the West Bank. This is next to the mosque. It's a community, the ladies gather and talk with their children. It's not a very attractive third place, but I think it's not a very relaxed place to live. So, but that's how they're meeting, and that is important. And often, a lot of churches have events nearby and events afterwards. So that's a common one, probably throughout the world. This is from Africa, from Gabon, and it's a market and cafe. Conversation regulars, this is Italy. Now I wanted to show, there are two design things I wanted to show you. This is an example. So here we have a bar and here we have a coffee shop. Now modern coffee shops, the person making the coffee or the people making the coffee are behind a barricade. How can they have the same feeling? No wonder people say, oh, a bar is more friendly. A bar just is more friendly. It's designed to be more friendly, not a factory. Even though it might, in terms of producing drinks, you see the same thing happening. I think that's really, really important. And maybe we'll hold Starbucks responsible for that too. this is Mexico. My friend who runs a project, a public spaces project, he told me this, he suggested this was a third place, and I don't think I would call it a third place. It's a destination rather than a hangout. This is the library in Great Barrington. They put chairs. Libraries want to be third places. They put chairs outside on the lawn, but look at the way the chairs are positioned and the type of chairs they've chosen. You're not going to promote conversation that way, even though this is the most people I've seen there, and so it's a very attractive spot. But something, if you wanted it to be a place where people would hang out and talk, you would have to arrange it differently. This is a coffee shop too in Great Barrington. This is pretty classic, isn't it? A lot of tables for two. I did find these people in the corner who actually were talking from different tables. They somehow realized they had some common connection and were talking to each other. But this is the new version of that coffee shop. I found I had an old photo from the earlier incarnation that says, "This ain't no library." And a lot of decorations you see, compare the wall art. Wall art are things to look at, really important, beauty or interest at least. So I thought that was I certainly preferred the previous incarnation. I think this is my last slide. No, I'll get some music. So there's a well-known book that was published in 2000, so 10 years after Ray's book, called Bowling Alone, which is about the demise of American community and very much tied to membership in organizations. Doesn't address the informal associations of third places. And Robert Putnam is very well known. He wants people to join, which is very different from Ray's approach, which is say we should think about the places that exist. But we have a bowling alley still in Great Barrington, and people don't bowl alone. They may not bowl in a league, but they do not bowl alone. And in fact, this place is as close to a hangout for people of modest means in a town that's increasingly expensive and tourist-oriented. It's actually a really nice hangout. So I wanted to share that. And then, even though I said that third places are not, it's not about events, going and just watching things. It's about conversation. But this is in a pub in Italy. And, no, this is a pub in London. Sorry, a community pub. Pubs are struggling in England, but pubs are central. They're British local. But they're having a hard time, higher rents, the cost of living in Britain is terrible. So this pub is now run as a nonprofit, and it's really worked to offer, the space for people outside pub hours, but also, having people bring their instruments in and play. And I thought that was, while they drink their beer, no smoking anymore. We used to joke in England, because you could still smoke when I lived there, and there were dartboards, and we'd say, can it be called a sport if you can hold a beer and a cigarette and do it? But no cigarettes anymore, thank goodness. I will be happy to take questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, when we take our...
So, probably like a lot of people, I use the Oldenburg readings in one of my classes.
Mhm.
And so I especially appreciated your presentation. And, when you started, I was thinking to myself, the list is so long, like, what isn't a third space? And I think after the pandemic, the term has cheapened a bit, and everybody's throwing out Adirondack chairs, like, everywhere you go. And so, what I really appreciated was that slide of the bartender. Because and so I started, that made sense to me, there's a difference, between a bartender that you can actually get up close to and a barista behind all this equipment.
Because you need to feel welcomed, even if you don't want to talk, but you need to, it is home away from home, like someone,
Well, I wonder though, are you, in the book, will you be able to talk about some of those differences? Same thing about joining a club versus being on a team.
I'm trying to fit it all in.
Because to me, that would be incredibly
Yeah.
useful.
Yes.
To publicize that we throw the term around a lot. A lot of people call them third spaces too.
I know.
The places.
When I started, I didn't realize I was going to have to tackle that.
I tend to patrol that
But
myself.
to value the third place, we need to make sure we're talking about the same thing. And it's not an argument. I actually have a call scheduled with a guy who's very big in public space, and he really doesn't like the idea that I'm saying that they're different. He really is not happy about this, but, when you write a book, it's good to have a little there.
So I'm also from Great Barrington, and I'm just curious about your opinion of the differences with third places in rural areas. You showed that picture of Fuel, but that's kind of our only coffee shop, and a lot of us are boycotting them right now because they hire local activists,
Mhm.
and there's just so few other places in a town that small.
It's way too expensive.
Yeah.
Great Barrington is really a problem. In fact, I talked to the town planner in Great Barrington. I said I was doing this, and he looked quizzically, and he said, I'm not sure. I don't think we have any third places. So no, Marty. The bowling alley,
That's true.
I recommend it.
Bars.
But, and the best bar I've found that has, and I wouldn't say, I've experienced British pubs, is the Miller. But it's tough and it's expensive. This also comes up all the time when I talk about this. People say it's too expensive. And this is what the community pub in London was dealing with, trying to find a way to lower the price of just the beer, so people, and that they didn't think they had to spend a lot. The commercial consequences, the corporate control of these things, and it really is a problem because a lot of people run third places out of love often, but they also need to keep a roof over their head. Yeah.
I have a question going back on in Mexico, the taco place.
Yeah.
What factors do you take into consideration on considering what place is a third place and which isn't? Because I come from a culture
Yeah.
where those kind of places are third places. I don't know if you're.
Do they have regulars? Are people hanging out there?
Yes.
You expect to meet people, then it would be then it's a third place. Yeah. I'm just saying that if it's just a place people come to, get food and go off, or just as Ray wrote in the original book about friend groups, if people just come in, couples or 4 people together and plump themselves in a booth or at tables for 2. By the way, the one thing I was so excited, I talked to Ray about circular tables once, because in China, tables, you always want circular tables. And I said, do you have any thoughts on tables and table size and how many people, because the Chinese think if you don't have at least 7 or 8 people, it's just like something's very off. And Starbucks apparently started with round tables. Feeling someone, Schultz or someone else, decided they were more friendly. And I think they are. I think that one of the problems with Fuel is that there's just lines of tables for 2. that does not speak to any kind of interaction. Booths are a problem too, because you get stuck. You want movement. The British pub is great. They usually have square tables, or often do, but you don't have waiter service or waitress service. So you have to go up and get your drink at the bar. So you're moving around. Somebody in your group, somebody you're with, somebody at your table is going to move around and often buy drinks for the rest of people. So there's a lot more movement, certainly generally has a positive effect.
So as a college student, I feel like the dining hall is maybe the closest thing we have to a third place, but even then it's still not quite matching the description.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you or others have thought about like what other types of buildings we could have on campus that would be better third places.
I'm interested in this because the size, I mean, the scale is one of the issues, isn't it?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I go to Hampshire College and we have DSAs, it's designated smoking area. So it is focused around smoking, but a lot of times that is where people meet, and sometimes, I'll be walking to class or walking to meeting, and I'll see somebody I know at the DSA and we'll start a conversation. So it does feel very much like one of our third places.
Uh-huh. Even if you're not smoking.
Yeah, people just hang out there.
So,
Chairs.
and what's the sort of size of it? How many?
It's really small, it's like 8 by 8, it's kind of a little shack, there's no walls.
See, I think that may be one of the characteristics, is size, or at least it doesn't have to be separate, but somehow designing things so there's a snug. Actually, in pubs, there's a bar and a main place, but really traditional country pubs also had things called snugs, like little side rooms, open on one side, the table and chairs. So it was private, but you still had to go to the bar to get your beer. And something like that, I think, is probably what would work. And some variation, because it's like, in Christopher Alexander's A Pattern Language, one of my favorite things there is that you should have unmatched chairs, because people are different sizes. And I think that might be true for third places. People need different sizes, some a little smaller. But generally speaking, if you look at anything about public spaces, they're all outside. Now, I showed you a lot of third places that were outside, didn't I? Penny Rock, the kids in the Hutong in China. But probably most third places are inside. They're probably harder to get photographs of. And I would love to, this is the sort of thing I'm really interested in, developing some sort of patterns for third places.
I wonder if it also has to do with like a mentality switch towards like time and stuff like that, because at least just like the neighborhood I'm in, like people have, I don't know, they get together, but it's like, oh, you have work or you have school or there's no time. So to sort of like focus more specifically on creating time within your day to go to these spaces, because there might be spaces available, but people just don't go to them, or they go in to grab a coffee and quickly leave.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So is that kind of
Absolutely. In fact, I talked to Kathy, the sociologist who moved to Italy, about this, and she said, you really have to give it time, in the sense of the time that you go and spend with people. That's a commitment, that you make to that group. But she said it also took time to become part of the group. She said she and her husband would go and sit at a table outside for 4 months, and then moved inside, I guess. But just trying to look friendly, but wherever the other people, the local people, knew each other, they were chatting away. And eventually, she said it took 4 months, somebody got up and came over and said, "You look like nice people, would you like to join us?" And now they're totally embedded. So that, it's not instant gratification. Now, the trouble is, how do you get a place started? You know, I think you look for someplace that has promise and then try to cultivate it. But this is a challenge. I mean, we can't just assume that if we look around, there's going to be a third place for us. And third places probably need to look different now for different people, different communities. You know, you want to welcome people, but you know, what exactly does that mean? You see how diverse they are. Third place is incredibly varied.
Do you think he would have written this book if he was Italian, or if he didn't live in a suburb in Florida?
No, I'll tell you, moving to Florida just about did him in.
That's why he wrote the book.
Yes, he wrote the book, and, you know, and maybe that's why, I mean, have I ever had a perfect third place? No. I grew up in suburbs, and then fled the suburbs for London, and then a small town that, as we were saying, is not, it looks picture perfect, but it's very much geared to tourists and second homeowners. It's expensive. I'm, you know, done a lot of community stuff there, but does it feel, you know, I mean, these things, this isn't easy. This isn't easy in the world we live in. Yeah.
Do you think that third places could almost be globalized through large corporations like Starbucks, or is there like a question of authenticity, like a small business?
Authenticity is essential, and I mean, Starbucks tried it, and actually in early days, see, they did things like they wrote people's names. You know, they tried to, like, where everybody knows your name. I mean, they really were inspired by this idea of a third place. My impression is that these are things that need to be quite localized. But we can get ideas from other people in other places. That's one of the things I hope by, you know, doing more international stuff. I think we need to be very flexible in our thinking. This idea of street life, outdoor life, hugely important in places that are, especially that are hot or where people don't have much money. And they can be great, marvelous. Yeah, please.
I guess I want to challenge a few things. I'll challenge my friend Michael here, but also a few things that you've said as you're trying to figure out these patterns. Because I wonder, there's a few of the definitions that you gave, right? The open and unstructured, the kind of social leveler, or my reading was more like mixer, social mixer, a place where different types of people could come together. And then, of course, the issue that money is never a barrier. It may not be free, but it's not a barrier. And I just wonder, in 1989, the buy-in to go into such a place as a proportion of, say, your daily income, or was probably a lot lower compared to today, in part because of the impact of Starbucks, right, and other places like that. So I do wonder when we're talking about is everything now a third place? Is it a public place? If we turn the dial more towards social mixing, we might be willing to give up the cost part and say, like, a better third place is one that really allows for social mixing. Whereas if we turn it a little bit more the other way, we're often really ruling out a lot of people being there because the barrier has gotten a lot higher compared to what people can spend on a daily basis, right?
I think finding places that are inexpensive enough, the kind of place where you can buy, just sip a beer for a couple hours, or the old thing, endless coffee. I mean, those things don't exist very often anymore. But the community pub in London has really worked to make that fine. People can come, the older guys can come in and nurse their fosters while the yuppies come in and have their special ale.
Yeah, I think I'm saying, like, if we're turning the dial where the value is really the social mixing, we might allow more of the public spaces in and rule out more of the corporate
But the
ties.
mixing, just being in the same place, the same location, is not the same thing. I mean, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it's the interaction that matters. And if you go, like, a really interesting discussion online from 2010, of museums wanted to become third places. And they finally concluded that that really wasn't their mission, they could perhaps be 2.5 places and work toward being third places. Because you go to a museum, you're not mixing. You're going there for another purpose. Museums and art galleries are great. But I will say one thing about the mixing and diversity, and Ray and I talked about this a lot, because he really wasn't sure what the answer was, is people do like to be with people who are like them as well, and have more, there's been a lot of attention on men's need for friends, and I have to say, all the people I have dealt with most closely to do with third places have been men. The loneliness is a bigger issue for men, and the need, that kind of casual conversation that you get in the third place, even if it revolves around sports, whatever. So is that okay, or should everyone go in? Should you just try and mix everyone up? How is that gonna affect the quality, the experience for everyone? So I think finding a balance there is an interesting and tricky one. There's nothing more exciting than to spend time and hang out with someone who's really different from you. That's my experience. It really can be great, but I can understand why sometimes that's not what someone wants. Did you have a question?
It's not really a question, but just an interesting experience that I had living in the city during COVID, because all the third places shut down, right? And after we got over the initial fear of lockdown, everybody was turning every public place into a third space. So I live by the river, and every weekend night, and even, just some after hours night, people would go down with their bottles of wine, their friend groups, to the river, along the river banks. Some people would bring, instruments. Parks, the same thing happened. Instead of going to a bar or a club, suddenly everybody was in the park with their friends. And as you said, people do like to go with their friends, their people, right? But they would go into that space, and then they would mingle with other people in the same way that they would in a third space. And just to kind of, I guess, link that to what the lady in the front was saying, it is really due to, so many factors, most of it corporate influence in this, and our values in this country in terms of spaces.
And distractions.
Well, and also just the history of other, European countries, or, South American, for example, having plazas or outdoor spaces where people gather, and we just haven't had that. During that time, that really, kind of took over, and people valued it a lot more.
And we had time during lockdown.
Right, and there was time, yeah.
That was a gift, in that sense, people,
But now all these, again, so many of these third spaces are just too expensive, and people are too rushed for time to go to them. So I also feel like sometimes a public space can't, like a park or, sidewalk or whatever, can be like a third place that's just under the right conditions, kind of.
It's under the right conditions, and perhaps with some of the right design. I think there has to be a role for planners in making parks and other places like that are free, into places where people will hang out regularly. It's certainly possible.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank our speaker one more time. She'll be up here in front if folks have individual questions, and we encourage you